So I first encountered Horace during one of my many delves into the eShop. Honestly, I completely ignored it. From the icon, I really thought it was some kind of like knockoff Lego game. Looks a bit like a Lego man. Anyway, a month or so goes by and I'm clicking through Metacritic to see if there's anything I feel like playing. Lo and behold, Horace. Till I clicked on it, I didn't even realise it was the game with the strange Lego logo, man. Then I saw the price, $10.99, seemed like a no-brainer, so here I am. A little research told me that Horace is the brainchild of just two individuals, Paul Hellman and Sean Scapelhorn, who have been working on this for the past 7 years. Now if somebody's going to put that much time into a game, you'd like to think it's going to be worth it. Imagine spending 7 years of your life on a rubbish game. Horace is predominantly a 2D platformer, however mixes and brings together a large number of different genres throughout the adventure. I'll touch on that more a little bit later on. Unlike many of the 2D platform games on the system, Horace has a heavy emphasis on story. In fact, the first couple of hours you'll find yourself watching cutscenes for around the same amount of time as actually playing any gameplay. Hearing this might put some people off. I will tell you now though, don't let it, because the story is so incredibly charming and unique. It focuses on a wealthy family headed by the Old Man and their possession of a new robot, Horace. The first few chapters sees Horace, who you control throughout your adventure, come into terms with family life and his transition into a member of the family. However, as you can imagine, this doesn't last. Short time into the game, the Old Man sadly passes away. At the same time, Horace strangely shuts down. That's a bit of a nap. Cut forward a few years. Horace wakes up to find the world much different to when he shuts down. Through engaging and exploring, you begin to understand that the world has been at war with evil robots that have turned on the human race. You also realise that the wealthy family and their friends have scattered around the town and the village. It's up to you, with the aid of ex-con Mr. Silton, to travel to different areas of the city to find and bring together the rest of the family and friends and help stop these mechanical foes. I mean, there's a pretty lengthy story arc and there's loads more to the story as well, but I don't want to ruin the whole story in this video. I will say though, it is multi-layered and, as I've said, is a major focus of the game. Thankfully, it engages from the outset and kept me invested right up until the very end. What also sets this story apart is the fantastic script and the many pop culture references. For me, the pop culture references were for the most part pretty easy to understand and spot. For others, depending on your age, you might have a little bit more trouble. To be honest though, I do feel like they've tried to cater to a number of audiences. For example, I heard mention of things like Coronation Street, there was Friends in the mix, Fresh Prince, and even a lengthy Bill and Ted's Adventure cameo. These references do blend seamlessly with the story, and it is fun to try and spot all the mentions throughout the game. Although a heavy emphasis, you'll be happy to know the game is not just all story based. There is gameplay as well, and thankfully the polish shown from the storytelling is also mirrored in the gameplay. As I've said, it is, for the most part, a 2D platformer. In the first 5 or 6 hours you'll be making your way through different environments in a linear fashion to reach the next room or the next checkpoint. The gameplay is smooth and quick. I've seen a lot of comparisons to games like Super Meat Boy and Celeste in the way it plays. I do guess that kind of holds true. The controls are tight and responsive, and like Meat Boy, it can be brutally difficult. This game differs to games such as this, however, by the power-ups you slowly attain as you work your way through the adventure. The first notable power-up is the ability to walk up walls and ceilings. Mastering your perception of rooms and platforms is an integral part of the game to get to the next area. There are times, for example, where you're able to walk up the side of a wall or hang underneath a platform but not actually go on top of the platform, so it'll be like spikes and stuff. You get used to this challenge and it really adds something different to the generic idea of wall jumping that you do in many of these other kind of 2D sort of pixelated games. It really differentiates it from anything I've experienced before. Now I will say one thing about this mechanic, and this might just be me, but by quickly moving from floor to wall to ceiling, back to wall and floor, etc., it did start to make me feel a little bit queasy. Now I don't know whether this is just unique to me, but it almost gave me a little bit of like motion sickness. Particularly if I played it in handheld and put it close to my face. It's the same kind of feeling you get from, well, that I've had before from like a VR racing game. Again though, it could just be me. A little later in the game, the 2D straight platformer becomes more of a Metroidvania type experience, where you explore the city and also the decrepit mains of the old wealthy family's manor, complete with a Metroidvania type map. Thankfully for me, figuring out where to go next in the game is not so difficult thanks to the marks on the map that literally point you the way. As with any good Metroidvania, you pick up more power-ups as you work your way through the Metroid type adventure. For example, you get the ability to swim, double jump, barge through certain walls. The game does well in letting you utilise these power-ups to advance the story. Peppered through the game, you'll also come across varied boss battles. These are real high points of the gameplay, as they are incredibly inventive and exciting. Again, they are tricky, but you can beat the bosses by sort of learning how they move through like repetition and just trying over and over again. I will say though that this method does rack up your death count, but as I've said, the game is pretty hard. My death count by the end of the game was, frankly, embarrassing. Throughout your adventure, you'll also be tasked with clearing rubbish, which is done by simply walking over them. Ultimately, your main purpose in life is to clear a million things as the game describes. It's a sort of comic nod to all the platformers that rely on collecting a lot of things. Now, I said before that the game mixes a number of different genres and gameplay mechanics, and this is true throughout your entire playthrough. As with the pop culture references, you also have gameplay references from years gone by. Horace the robot is a huge video game player, and because of this, you find yourself playing many retro minigames throughout your adventure, which are nice little surprises. From Pong to Pac-Man to Outrun. If you used to love playing these kind of games when you were a kid, you'll love how they are integrated into this game. It's very cleverly done. Now you might think that these might be a welcome sidestep from the main adventure and its heavy difficulty level, and that is true for some of the game. Later on, however, the mini-games become more integral to the continuation of the story, and you'll be tasked with getting much higher scores to advance to the next part of the story. One section of the game which did take me an embarrassing amount of time to get through was the Sports Day chapter of the game, where you play small mini-games that you have to win to get to the next bit. You have to like win a Sports Day thing. It took me ages anyway. Visually, as with many of these 2D indie games, it has a heavy pixelated aesthetic, and this is particularly evident during the cutscenes. I've said this for other reviews I've done before, this sadly might put some people off the game, which in my opinion would be a shame. Although it's not a classic 4K ultra realistic spectacle, it is actually kind of beautiful in its own way. If you ignore the game because of this, it really is your own loss, and you really are missing out. Audibly, I've read comments saying that they hate the way the game is narrated, which, I mean, I guess is fair enough. Pretty much the entire adventure is narrated like a book by Horace, who has this unusual yet classic robot-esque mechanical voice, which I'm not going to do, but he does. I can't see why some people find it a little bit annoying. I myself found it quite charming. I thought it fit this unusual game quite well. Music-wise, again, the game is full of pop culture throwbacks with classical songs and sounds you may recognise from the movies or other games. The reason I've decided to do a review on this game is frankly because I hadn't heard of it until I bought it. Now, I like to follow gaming news and whatnot, and yet I'd never really run into this one. After spending a fair amount of time with it, I think it would be such a shame for more people not to play it. It is quite the game. It's a funny, story-driven gem of an indie. I definitely think it's relevant, what with the Indie Direct the other day, which, for the record, I actually thought was great. There's a lot of games I'm looking forward to. I am also the kind of person who loves to sift through the indie sales, but with this one I didn't have to. At full price of just $10.99, it is definitely worth it and a bargain. I wouldn't even bother waiting for a sale, just buy it. As a score, I'd give it a 9 out of 10, and I only docked it 1 point because it made me feel a bit sick. This game might not rate so highly with everyone that plays it. For those too young not to understand the pop culture or gaming references, or those who aren't big fans of brutally difficult and challenging games, you may not think of it quite highly as myself. But for me, I'd wholeheartedly recommend it, and it's certainly one of, if not my favourite game I've played so far this year. Anyway, thank you for watching this review. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.